London, June 20th, 1837. A city suspended in time, unaware that the pulse of an empire is about to change forever. At Kensington Palace, the silence is shattered. A knock that carries the weight of a crown and the breath of a new age. The Archbishop of Canterbury and the Lord Chamberlain have ridden through the night from Windsor. They bring news of a king's end and a girl's beginning. Inside, the palace is a labyrinth of rules and shadows. For 18 years, it has been the setting for a psychological battleground. Princess Victoria lived under the Kensington system, a draconian set of rules designed to ensure she remained weak, isolated, and entirely dependent. Even her private thoughts were not her own. Her mother regularly inspected her journals, seeking any sign of rebellion or independent thought. She was never allowed a room of her own. Every night she slept in her mother's chamber, her every breath accounted for. Her mother, the Duchess of Kent, and the ambitious Sir John Conroy were her constant shadows. Independence was a crime. Every step she took, every word she spoke, was monitored. She was a pawn being groomed for a regency that would never come. At Windsor, King William IV was dying, but his loathing for the Duchess and Conroy gave him a final iron strength. He vowed to live until Victoria reached her 18th birthday, effectively stripping her mother of any legal claim to power. William IV had survived for years on sheer willpower, a dying man clinging to life just to spite the woman who would be regent. Village and cities, the cry went up. The king is dead. Long live the queen. On May 24th, 1837, the bells rang. Victoria had turned 18. The regency was dead. The king had won his final battle. 1 month later, in the deep silence of 2:12 a.m., King William IV breathed his last. The old world was gone. The dawn belonged to a girl. Victoria was awoken by her mother. The Archbishop was waiting. The girl who had never been left alone was about to face the world, alone. This is the story of the heart versus crown, the day a princess became a monarch and a woman found her sovereignty. Alexandrina Victoria was 18 years and 27 days old. To the men who came for her that morning, she was a child. They expected tears. They found ice. She met them in her dressing gown and slippers, her hair falling loose. It was an audience stripped of all royal pomp, and it was entirely her own. She insisted on seeing them alone. It was her first act of sovereignty. The chains of the Kensington system were not just broken, they were discarded. Lord Conyngham knelt and kissed her hand. He addressed her as queen. In that single quiet moment, the princess vanished. An icon was born. In that pre-dawn audience, the simplicity of her dress was a stark contrast to the enormous power she had just inherited. A queen in cotton. Village and cities, the cry went up. The king is dead. Long live the queen. She returned to her room and wrote in her diary, "Since it has pleased Providence to place me in this station, I shall do my utmost to fulfill my duty." She then had breakfast alone. For 18 years, every meal had been a monitored event. Now she was the mistress of her own table and her own destiny. Her first letter was to her Aunt Louisa. She wrote of her sadness for the king, but also of the heavy responsibility that now rested on her young shoulders. But the real test would come at 11:30, the first Privy Council. The Red Saloon at Kensington was filling with the most powerful men in the land. Nearly 100 men waited. They expected a frightened girl, a puppet for her mother. They were about to be mesmerized by a queen. She entered alone, dressed in deep black mourning for her uncle. She walked with a natural dignity that silenced the room instantly. She read her declaration in a voice that was described as silver and clear. There was no tremor. She was every inch a monarch, and they knew it. She promised to maintain the Protestant religion and the rights of her subjects. The men who had ruled for decades were struck by her composure. Her mourning dress, though black to the eye that day, would eventually fade to a rusty brown, a silent witness to the passage of time and the fugitive nature of 19th century dyes. Village and cities, the cry went up. The king is dead, long live the queen. The Duke of Wellington later remarked that she acted with more self-possession than any man he had ever known. The child was gone. Her first official signature was on the oath to the Church of Scotland. The R for Regina followed her name for the first time. The reign had begun. As the room emptied, the silence that followed was different. It was no longer the silence of expectation, but the silence of a kingdom that had found its center. With her accession, the crowns of Great Britain and Hanover were severed. She was Queen of the UK, while her uncle Ernest became King of Hanover. As she spoke, the room didn't just listen. It fell into a silence that was described as almost reverent. The girl they had dismissed had commanded them all. Village and cities, the cry went up. The king is dead. Long live the Queen. As Victoria ascended, her uncle Ernest departed for Hanover. The crowns were divided, and the young Queen stood alone as the sole head of the British House. Within hours, she met the man who would guide her through the first years of her reign. Her Prime Minister, Lord Melbourne. He was 58, she was 18. He became the mentor, the father figure, and the friend she had so desperately needed. Melbourne spent hours with her every day, explaining the complexities of the British Constitution and the personalities of her ministers. That evening, she dined as Queen for the first time. The meal was simple, but the service was silent and deferential. The world had shifted on its axis. She wrote that her affairs could not be in better hands. Melbourne taught her the art of politics and the art of being a queen. Through a prolific correspondence, Feodora offered the Queen something Melbourne could not: the candid voice of a sister who understood the cage they had shared. Married off to Germany when Victoria was only 9, Feodora had been her protector at Kensington. Now they were separated by an ocean of protocol. But sovereignty came with a price. To be queen, she had to dismantle the life her mother had built for her. The reckoning was coming. By 1839, the heart versus crown conflict reached a boiling point. The bedchamber crisis would be the first major test of her iron will. When Lord Melbourne resigned, the Tory leader Sir Robert Peel demanded Victoria replace her Whig ladies with Tory ones. To Peel, it was politics. To Victoria, it was personal. Sir John Conroy was the first to go. Victoria effectively exiled him from her presence. The man who had tried to rule her was now a stranger. Her mother was moved to distant apartments. Victoria would see her, but she would never again be controlled by her. The Queen was free. The Queen's move to Buckingham Palace was also a strategic maneuver. Her mother's new rooms were placed as far as possible from the Queen's own suites. Village and cities, the cry went up: "The king is dead. Long live the Queen." The Duchess could not believe the daughter she had raised so carefully had turned on her so completely. The power had shifted in a single dawn. 3 weeks after her accession, she moved to Buckingham Palace. She was the first monarch to call it home, a new palace for a new era. On her first night at the palace, she finally slept in a room where her mother was not present. The silence was the sound of freedom. Her first morning at Buckingham Palace was silent. The girl who had been surrounded by shadows was now bathed in the light of a new world. Her first request was simple: a bedroom of her own. It was a declaration of independence that resonated louder than any speech. It brings us back to that famous day when she was 12, when her governess, Letson, slipped a genealogical chart into her history book. Upon realizing how close she was to the throne, the young princess burst into tears. She wasn't crying for power, but for the weight of it. "I will be good," she reportedly said. It became the moral compass for her entire life, a promise to be a different kind of monarch. Beside her stood Baroness Letson, the governess who had protected her through the dark years of the Kensington system. Their bond was her only true shield. Her uncles, George IV and William IV, had left the crown tarnished by scandal and excess. Victoria was determined to restore its dignity. She brought a moral earnestness to the throne that the nation had not seen in decades, a commitment to duty that would define her age. George IV and William IV had left the monarchy a shattered institution. Victoria wasn't just inheriting a throne, she was inheriting a mess. But the corridors of power are lonely places. For every act of leadership, there was a personal cost. The crown was a heavy burden. Every signature, every decree was a choice between the woman and the queen. The heart was often the first casualty of state. In the quiet hours, the weight of the crown was not just a metaphor. It was a physical presence, a constant reminder of the life she had traded for a title. The crown cast a long shadow over her personal life. Every joy, every sorrow was now public property. The price of power was the loss of the private self. Being good meant choosing duty over personal desire. The heart versus crown conflict would be the theme of her entire reign. Even in her moments of triumph, there was a profound loneliness. To be queen was to be set apart, to be a person inside a title. She was 18. She was the most powerful woman in the world, and she was, in many ways, utterly alone. Outside, the people cheered for a queen they didn't know. They cheered for a new era, a new hope, and a girl who promised to be good. The sound of the herald's trumpets was the heartbeat of the nation, signaling a return to order and a promise of moral restoration. The weight of their expectations was immense. Every decision, every gesture was now a matter of state. The princess was dead, the monarch lived. The nation was hungry for a moral leader. They saw in this young girl the possibility of a better, more stable Britain. Across the nation, the heralds carried her name. In villages and cities, the cry went up. The king is dead, long live the queen. She reigned for 63 years. An era would take her name. But it all started with that knock at Kensington, a moment of pure transition. She saw the world transform. From the age of horse and sail to the age of steam and steel, she was the anchor in a sea of change. Under her reign, Britain became an industrial giant. The empire expanded to the corners of the globe, and at the center of it all was Victoria. She would become the grandmother of Europe, her bloodline woven into the crowns of a dozen nations, a matriarch of an entire continent. In her later years, the 18-year-old girl in the dressing gown was still there, still striving to be good, still carrying the weight of history. When she finally closed her eyes in 1901, the world she left was unrecognizable from the one she had inherited at 18. The Victorian era was over. She remains etched in stone and spirit across the world. The girl who promised to be good became the woman who defined an empire's soul. Her legacy is not just one of power and expansion, but of the person inside the title, the heart that beat beneath the heavy robes of state. The next morning, the world woke up to a new era. The girl in the dressing gown was gone, and the Victorian age had begun its long, steady ascent. We return to Kensington, to the place where it all began. The echoes of that morning still linger in the halls of history. We return to Kensington, to the place where it all began. The echoes of that morning still linger in the halls of history. The morning of June 20th, 1837 was a moment history held its breath. A girl woke up, and a legend began. A legend of duty, love, and the crown. The crown is heavy, but the hearts beneath it are often heavier. Every monarch has a story, and every story has a heart. Which royal heart do you want to hear about next? Tell us in the comments whose story we should uncover from the shadows of history. If you've been moved by this story, please subscribe to Crowns and Sorrows for more intimate journeys through the corridors of power. Thank you for joining us in the candlelit halls of history. Until next time, keep the hearts of the past close to your own.